name's Madeleine, and on behalf of Forest Ontario and York Region, I'm here to take you on an interpretive adventure through the Eldred King Woodlands, a forest here in York Region. So today we're going to be looking at the diversity of wildlife in the area. We're going to take a short hike and look at various sites throughout this forest. On this virtual hike, I'm going to lead you on about a 2.5 kilometer long trail. Though there are a lot of trails in this forest, as you can probably see on the map behind me, we're only going to be taking a short loop that'll take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Along this hike, I will be making multiple stops to tell you all about fun facts in the area and give you a little activity to do when you're here on your own. If you'd like a longer hike than what this video shows, you are more than welcome to explore the trails at your leisure. Regardless of how long you'd like to spend in the woods, I recommend coming prepared. Be sure to bring a map, a water bottle, and appropriate footwear whenever you intend to go out for a hike. On this hike in particular, I also recommend printing off the activities listed in the description below and bringing along a pen or pencil. When you're hiking, please also remember the golden rule. Take nothing but pictures and leave nothing but footprints. Little things like bringing trash home and leaving bits of nature where you found them will ensure that others can enjoy these trails just as much as you. Before we get started, a word of warning. As many of the trails within these woods are broad and exposed to a lot of sunlight, they are home to poison ivy. Poison ivy is a hazard that hikers should make a point to avoid at all costs. All parts of the plant, from its leaves to its roots, contain an oil that can trigger an allergic reaction and cause a terrible itchy rash on any skin it comes in contact with. You may not react the first time you touch poison ivy, or even the 10th, but the risk of getting a rash increases with each time you touch it. If you come in contact with poison ivy, you should wash the area with soap and warm water as soon as possible. If you get poison ivy on your clothes at all, I suggest tossing it into the wash as soon as you get home and washing it, as the oils can linger on clothing for up to a year or even more. While hazardous to humans, these plants do have a place in Ontario's forests. They are a beloved treat of white-tailed deer, who will eat each and every part of this plant: leaves, berries, stems, all of it. Other animals like squirrels, crows, and black bears will eat the whitish-green berries throughout the fall and winter months. As a native species, it is not controlled on these trails, with the exception of some adventurous ones that go onto the trail proper. As such, please stay on the trails when you're hiking in this forest, or any forest, and keep your dog on its leash so that it doesn't run through poison ivy and come back to you to get on your hands. All right, let's get started on our hike. As you start your walk along the trail, taking in the sights of the forest, I'm sure you're asking yourself many questions like, why are so many trees in perfect rows? Or why is the trail so wide and flat? The two are more connected than you may think. These trees planted in rows are all red pine, one of the most commonly planted trees in Ontario. These ones in particular were planted at various points in history, but some of the oldest plantations in the area were planted in 1924. Red pine, known for growing straight and being a strong wood, can be used to make utility poles, posts, railway ties, and log houses, among other things. Not only is it easier to plant trees in rows, but it's also easier to maintain and thin these stands over many decades after the initial planting. This forest, like other tracts in the region, have been actively managed by York Region for many years now. Forest management can include a variety of tasks, but almost all of them are made easier if the forest is accessible to vehicles. As such, many of the trails in here are actually access roads, which is why they are so wide and flat. Despite there being a lot of trails in this tract of forest, there are only two markings that you may see on trees. There are white rectangles that you may have seen earlier on in your hike that mark the Oak Ridges Trail, which is the trail that cuts through multiple tracts of forest. In the Eldred King tract, you may see blue rectangles. We aren't going to be taking either of these trails, and instead we're cutting our own path. As you may have noticed, there are a lot of little trails in the Eldred King Woodlands. maps are possibly the most handy thing you could have on you. Not only to tell you where you are and where you're going, but it lets you deviate from your initial plans and make your own trail. As we continue on our hike, take a look at the scavenger hunt activity and see how many things you can spot before we reach our next stop. Here we are at our second stop. I hope you enjoyed your scavenger hunt on the way over here. If you haven't checked off all the squares, don't worry, you still have plenty of time to find the rest. From here, we can see many different trees and some changes to the landscape. Believe it or not, this forest and all of the surrounding forests are a part of the Oak Ridges Moraine. This is a large landform that encompasses around 1,900 square kilometers from Caledon to Peterborough. There are many different ecosystems or communities of living and non-living things like plants, animals, water, and soil that can be found within this area. Ecosystems found in the moraine include woodlands, wetlands, and bogs. The moraine is a part of the Green Belt and one of the largest continuous stretches of forest in southern Ontario. The forests here are mixed forests, containing both coniferous or evergreen trees and deciduous or broadleaf trees. First, let's take a closer look at red pine. I pointed out red pine planted in rows earlier on in the hike, but here, let's look at its bark. So red pine can be identified by having brownish red bark here that's sort of flaky. Please don't peel the bark though. Looking deeper at the tree, you'll notice that it has a pair of needles for leaves. So these needles are long and rather sturdy and very straight. Closely related to the red pine, we have the white pine. So white pine can be identified by having more grayish brown bark. It's way less flaky. And if you look at the needles, there are 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a bunch. The easiest way to remember this is to spell the word WHITE. 5 letters for 5 needles. Trees come in all shapes and sizes. As an activity, while we walk to our next stop, I would like for you to look at 2 different trees and spot the differences between them. Ask yourself questions like, which one has smoother bark? What are the differences between the leaves? Does one of them have needles? Does one of them have broad leaves? If they both have broad leaves, what's the difference between those 2 leaves? Also, I would like for you to describe what those leaves look like to you. If you're interested, you can also play Leaf Bingo, an activity included in the description below. Let's go! We've reached the turning point in our stop, the Eldred Forest Pond. As mentioned previously, we're in the Oak Ridges Moraine, and the Oak Ridges Moraine is the starting point for a great many streams that will flow either south into Lake Ontario or north into Lake Simcoe. One such stream goes through this forest and was dammed so that it could create a pool. Now this man-made pool of water was likely initially created for fire suppression in the area, but now it's just a nice feature of the area. If you check out the end of this pond, you can see the artificial dam that stems the flow of water to create the pool. It still allows for water to flow through, as you can hear, but just at a slower pace. It's similar to what beavers will do to create a stream passing through a forest, and with similar results. Forests are dynamic environments where changes can regularly happen on large and small scales. Dams such as this one, whether naturally or artificially created, provide a welcome gap in the canopy for birds to hunt in, a sunny spot for turtles to bask in, and a relaxed, slow-moving body of water that fish and amphibians alike can safely lay their eggs in. As you explore and investigate the pond and the area around it, I'm sure you're noticing a lot of different things. You're probably hearing birds call off in the distance, maybe some crickets over in the grass. In the water there might be tadpoles, toads, and other amphibians. There may also be fish, or even a turtle setting itself on a log in the middle of the pond. All these things happen at different times of the year, but it's a very active spot for local wildlife to just come and enjoy the water. At this stop, I have another activity for you. We are going to create a soundscape. What we're going to do is take a phone and make a recording of the area around us and see what we can hear. Sitting or standing, close your eyes and let the sounds of the pond and surrounding forest wash over you. What do you hear? A bird off in the distance? Crickets in the tall grass? A toad calling by the water? Leaves rustling in the wind? Take a few minutes to absorb the sounds of the forest around you. If you'd like, you can record your soundscape from this pond and share it with us over on social media, both to Forests Ontario or York Region. Both accounts are linked in the description below. We're halfway back on our way from our last stop. I hope you heard some interesting wildlife on your walk over here. Now, at the last stop, I mentioned that forests are dynamic. That is because things are constantly changing. Trees are falling down, new trees are growing, animals are making their homes in places. These things change on a year-to-year basis. Now, I'd like you to picture something for me. Imagine that a large storm comes through. It tears through the forest and knocks down a series of large, old trees. Knocking down these trees then leaves a large hole in the canopy, or the upper part of trees where you find all of the leaves and branches. Now, to the average passerby, this is a tragedy. These trees have been growing for decades and now they're lost. However, to understory trees and opportunistic plants, this is an opportunity. With a gap in the canopy, sunlight filters down to the forest floor. This allows understory trees, like young beech and maple trees, to soak up the sun and race to the top to fill in that gap. In the interim, while they're trying to grow big and tall, you'll find a lot of wildflowers, grasses, and other smaller plants that are making the most out of the sunlight. These plants would have come in from seeds attached to animals and such. So here we are on the other side of the trail. Earlier on, we talked a bit about forest management. Now, forest management includes, but isn't limited to, harvesting trees. A lot of tree harvesting is actually designed to mimic natural disturbances. For example, when red pine plantations, like the one behind me, is thinned out, it creates large gaps in the canopy. Not only do these large gaps encourage the remaining red pines to grow broader and fill in the spaces with their own branches, but it also encourages the growth of hardwoods in the understory. Hardwoods are trees like maples, beeches, and occasionally ash trees. These trees start growing in the understory, and when they're young, they do like a little bit of shade, but as they get larger, they seek more sunlight. When these gaps in the canopy are opened up to them, they race to the top and begin to fill it out for themselves. Even if there was no harvesting done in this forest, it would still be dynamic and constantly changing due to other disturbances, such as storms or insect infestations. Before we go to our next stop, I'd like for you to look around this area and see if you can find a tree stump. If you can, try to figure out maybe roughly how old the tree was when it was taken down, and see if it is bigger or smaller than the other trees around it. As an extra activity, if you'd like, you can look at the trees lining this trail and see if you can identify some of the smaller ones based on their leaves alone. A handy tree ID guide is available in the description below. All right, let's go to our final stop. Come on. Here we are at our final stop on this hike. I hope you found some interesting trees to ID on your way over here. Now, we talked a lot about forest dynamics over there, and that forests are thriving, dynamic environments. However, there are threats to this environment. Dog strangling vine is a particularly persistent invasive plant that can be found in fields and forests alike. It can negatively impact areas such as woodlots, reforestation projects, and so on. In a forest like this, it will choke out native species of seedlings, saplings, and other understory trees just trying to make their way up towards the canopy. These vines also really like climbing trees, so they like the large open spaces left underneath conifer plantations, like these red pines here. Invasive plants can be introduced to forests, grasslands, or any environment in a few different ways. Some seeds, like those belonging to dog strangling vine, can be carried on the wind to a new location. Others are carried by animals, either by attaching to their fur or taking a trip through their digestive tract. One of the most common vectors on trails like this, however, are humans. To prevent the spread of invasive species, we have 2 tips. The first is to stay on the trails when you're hiking in a forest like this. By traveling on the managed trail, you decrease your chances of picking up seeds from an invasive plant that may be along the edge. Staying on the trails also ensures that you don't have a close encounter with poison ivy, even though it's not an invasive species, just a hazard. The second tip is to prevent any opportunistic seeds from spreading to new environments. Shoes, bike tires, and pet paws, among other things, can track mud, seeds, and parts of the plant from location to location. We humans can travel much further thanks to our cars and other vehicles, so it's important that we don't track seeds or parts of invasive plants home with us. At this stop, we have one final activity for you to participate in. It's a wanted poster for dog strangling vine. We've already provided all of the information on the wanted poster, and what we need you to do is draw a picture of this plant, whether it's the leaves, the vines, or the seed pods of it, and then give it a nickname. Once you're done that, review the information provided on the wanted poster and familiarize yourself with this invasive plant. From this stop, we have a short while to go and a hill to climb, so I will meet you at the trailhead. All right, so here we are back at the trailhead up near the parking lot. I hope you've enjoyed our adventure through the Eldred King Woodlands. And I know we touched on a lot of topics today, but all of them are just a part of day-to-day life in this forest. We talked about plants that find their homes either up in the canopy, down in the understory, or in small patches of sunlight throughout the forest. We talked about the access roads being more than just trails, but useful for forest operations. We looked at wildlife both in the forest and over at the pond. And we learned that this forest is so desirable to live in that even invasive plants want to call it their home. Thank you for watching this video. If you found it interesting, entertaining, or even if you just made it to the end, please follow the link to a survey down below to let us know what you thought about it. Once again, thanks for joining us on this virtual hike, and we hope to see you soon.